Uber expected to register IPO on April 11th, anticipates $100 billion in valuation. Startups in Seattle, where are the Amazon spin-out companies? In Delivery Nation, all roads lead to the final mile. UPS to roll out major pricing revamp as it benefits from network efficiency steps. U.S. carriers face carbon surcharge in Canadian provinces. States taking the lead in policy disruption for AV and EV. Closing drug test loopholes could hit driver availability. Virginia sets higher fuel taxes, registration fees to fund improvements, especially on 81. Trucking and rail industries to advise regulators on national security. And Port Report, Trump signs executive order seeking to boost U.S. energy development. We talk about all these headlines and more on today's What the Truck. TriumphPay is the leading carrier payment platform in transportation. With over 50,000 carriers paid, TriumphPay helps to drive capacity, efficiency, and cash flow for brokers and shippers. Visit TriumphPay.com to learn more. I'm Chad Prevost.
And I'm Ellis Smith.
And we are going to have a regulatory final mile and LTL kind of freight tech and capital investment theme today for our podcast.
It's going to be a jolly good time.
Can you handle it?
Laws and lobbyists and everything going on. Wait, what's the next batch of rules that everybody's going to have to contend with here?
We're missing JP, who's at the TIA conference in Orlando, but I doubt he's missing us.
I just spoke to him on the phone. He sends his regards and is here in spirit.
Yeah, he's just kind of, speaking of spirits, actually, Ellis, what are you imbibing on?
Well, I'm chowing down on a big old hunk of Guinness here. This is with the nitrogen pod in it, where when you open it up,
it sounds like a paint can.
Yes.
Wow, that was a juice.
Yes.
That might win the podcast award for beer opening. I have to say, since you bought the beer, I'm not going to complain. So Guinness, surprising. For every 12 ounces, I believe only 199 calories.
A light beer,
but
if you will.
Also a surprisingly light ABV. So, way to be a lightweight here.
Having a sober What the Truck here with our
I guess
guest.
so. Hey, what could go wrong? So we're gonna talk a little bit about the freight tech and capital investment here to lead us off. I thought that this was kind of one of the more interesting headlines, Ellis. So Lyft, we've been covering Lyft, and Lyft has, it's been interesting with Lyft, right? They launched ahead of Uber.
They got there first. They were oversubscribed. They had a focused business plan that just included the United States, whereas Uber is spread out all over the globe. Just opened in Saudi Arabia, for goodness sakes. And they're doing Uber Eats and investing in scooters and all these other things. So a much bigger business, but perhaps a more complicated business to pitch to investors. Whereas Lyft, we just give car rides to people.
And they probably are overvalued. That's what we're hearing from some of the analysts. Their stock has been, and this is happening today because we're recording here on April 11th, and Uber is going IPO
any minute now, we think,
today, and so but right in the face of Lyft starting off with shares at $72 a share and falling. When I checked it this morning, they were down to $60.
Yeah, initially their target price I think was lower. It was in the 60s, and it was oversubscribed. It was so popular, people were piling into the stock, and so at IPO time, the price was a little higher. And then these analyst reports were coming out saying, well, look, Lyft, it's real nice and all that you've had your IPO, but we're not sure how you're going to hit all these targets for earnings, because as we look at your business, and you have to make all this public now that you're a publicly traded company, as we look at all these documents you've released, you're either going to have to go fully autonomous on your cars. If you have to still pay drivers what you're paying them now, it ain't happening. Essentially is what multiple analysts concluded. And that was a bit of a gut punch, I think, for folks who bought in at 72 and have lost that value now.
Well, some of the criticism that we're hearing is that they're saying, some analysts are saying, well, look, the customer is a free agent, the driver is a free agent. There's no stickiness, as they call it, to the business model. While I respect what I don't understand, and I don't know what I don't know, I have to say there's a lot of stickiness. I think that this crowdsourcing, this ride sharing seems like it's not only here to stay, but going to dramatically grow.
I agree with that, but let me pose you a question.
Okay.
How would you compare the ride experience on Lyft versus Uber? What is the competitive advantage? You've got two apps on your phone. What makes you reach for one and not the other?
Maybe because one has reached more of a critical mass of drivers. But, okay. So I see where we're going. So free agent, there's no anybody.
As a customer, I don't care whether I'm hailing a cab or whether, if I see one or whether there's an Uber person near me and I can get them in 3 minutes or a Lyft guy. I just want to get there. Like, it's not like I go in the Lyft and I've got free scotch and soda, or Uber, I get a massage on the way. You're riding in somebody's Toyota Corolla and going to your thing, hopefully on time. That's all you care about as a consumer. So I agree that ride hailing isn't going anywhere, but I question what's Lyft's competitive advantage. I think it gets into cost structure. Who's going to be able to do it cheaper, because people do care about that, and who's going to be able to
right, because you got to keep the drivers happy.
Yeah, you've got to do it cheaper, but you got to pay your drivers more, because the more drivers you have, the more people are going to get rides, and they're going. If you get a ride quickly, then you're more likely to use that service, I would argue.
Well, as we try to keep the tempo up with our massive amount of headlines and how we're going to get all of these in time, I don't know, Ellis. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here on this award-winning podcast.
Yeah, we won a bronze. A bronze. It's almost like, well, I would just almost rather have not won the award.
Well, they always say in the Olympics, silver is the first loser. Right, and so the silver guy wishes he or she had gotten gold, but bronze is just happy to be there.
Right,
we're just happy
we are just happy to be here.
They're just happy to be part of it.
Thank you to the A's-B's for having us aboard. Who knew? And thank you for listening and bearing with us here. One of the things that a really interesting story, one more on the freight and tech and capital investment lines. Linda Baker had a terrific, in fact, she broke the Uber news too. So kudos to Linda Baker on our editorial staff. The startups in Seattle, it's interesting. So you've got Microsoft, Amazon, another huge one, Starbucks. You've got startups, amazing, iconic brands coming out of Seattle, and yet what they're finding is that they don't seem to have a lot of young venture capital in the space for where they're positioned and for all the tech and all of the innovation. One of the things is Amazon seems to be doing a really good job at kind of holding on to their talent. They keep things interesting in spite of being a very big company. They keep innovating. And so all of that talent isn't just kind of leaving and dispersing out into the Seattle, I guess, hemisphere. Here's something, though, that I thought was interesting and kind of funny in a way. It's like there is a lot of money. There's a lot of investment capital in Seattle, but a lot of times, it's like when someone makes a lot of money, because kind of regionally where they're located, they've made their money and now they're going to go skiing. They're not going to really go back and invest as angel investors and kind of keep that community thriving for the young generations in the seed funding startups. So it's as Linda writes, she says if that sounds glib, the numbers aren't. Seattle actually ranks 4th in the country in terms of venture capital investment. Wow. And this sounds like a lot. It's almost at $3 billion. Everybody says billion with a B.
Billion.
But if you compare it to almost $12 billion in Massachusetts and $14.31 billion in New York. And check this one out. Of course, maybe not a surprise, $77.3 billion in California. It pales in comparison.
Yeah, I mean, there's this theory whenever, and we talked about it when Nashville, for instance, and we're, of course, located in Tennessee, when Nashville was attracting Amazon, the theory for the incentives and we'll build your parking garage for you and give you a tax break and all these things is that when a tech company comes to town, and Amazon is a world-class recruiter, right? Everywhere they go, it's great to be able to work for Amazon. It's like being able to work at Apple or Microsoft. They're a world-class company. Mm-hmm. And so you're thinking, as Nashville, we're going to bring all these people here, and they'll stay for a couple of years, and then they're going to spin off all this talent that's just going to percolate through the entire community and make everybody more and start new businesses. In fact, I even wrote a story where I claimed that was going to take place.
At least you're owning up to it now.
But that theory doesn't always work if it remains a great place to work for the talent in terms of your developers, your creative designers, your business people. If they're having the time of their life, if you're paying them well, if they're getting stock options and they've got a good work-life balance, they're probably not looking that hard for another job. I mean, where do you go from Amazon? If you're in the top tier there,
yeah,
one of the world's biggest companies, most interesting companies, getting in now to LTL and brokerages and freight and all these other things. Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
Where do you go from there?
I don't know, but some argue that the idea of Seattle not having the vibrant startup scene is kind of old news, and that actually they do have a vibrant startup community. They just lack the density of some major that some of the major tech markets have. But I don't know. Maybe there will be a bit of a trickle down effect with the talent in Seattle. Sounds like a nice place to live
if
and
you
be
like
in the
rain.
Startup scene. Way to be a downer on Seattle.
Well, they do have some companies, though. To be fair, I mean, I think Expedia is there. There are some companies that are there, but I just think.
Well, yeah, it's a big city.
Yeah, it's a big city, and those are tech companies, and a lot of Microsoft folks have gone on to found other companies. I feel like every time I'm in the tech world, I'm meeting a former Microsoft employee. You don't meet as many former Apple employees, though. Interestingly, I kind of wonder if that's just some companies that's just not a thing.
But aren't they a little more notorious about not taking as good a care of their employees? Apple, they kind of keep the salaries. I've understood that they were lower or something.
I don't know. They're in a spaceship now, so they've got it looks like they're in the Starship Enterprise, their new headquarters, and they've got it's a little bit like Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's a big circle, an infinity ring where they can walk around and be productive, and there's flower gardens and coffee shops and baristas and massages and nap rooms. Hard to say.
Nap rooms.
This sucks. I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna go work in a factory and make widgets. Just hard, probably hard to do that.
Wow, I can tell we are right on target for our meeting our time goal. But that is no. But you know what? We are here to enlighten and entertain. Right, Ellis. So that's good stuff, man. And I could use a good nap room every now and then. I have to admit, a little power nap. Actually, just briefly here, I just read Daniel Pink's Win, and he's talking about timing is everything, and he's saying that there is research that says that the 20-minute power nap is a real thing.
Oh, for me,
where
it is.
You can go down and you can touch into that REM without coming up groggy.
You get just enough.
He even calls it. He says you can have a nappuccino. And now check this out. He says you can drink a cup of coffee and go take a nap.
I've actually done this.
Because the coffee doesn't kick in.
It takes a minute to percolate, if you will, inside your system.
This would never work for me.
And then your eyes slam open in about 20 minutes.
Really?
And you bolt out of bed and you're ready to rock.
Well, that's what everybody's probably feeling like doing, listening to us right now. Having a nappuccino. No, Mark Solomon was at our the home delivery conference in It was in Philadelphia this year. I remember going to it last year in Atlanta, and he covers a lot of our last mile stuff. And,
UPS, FedEx, etc.
And so he had a good overview article of the Delivery Nation. We'd like to encourage our listeners to check out. It's extensive, and also the UPS rollout of the major pricing revamp. is interesting. But so overall, like one of his takeaways of looking at all things omnichannel is that not only is last mile and e-commerce like having a profound effect on American business now, we are basically becoming a quote unquote delivery nation. And here's an interesting projected number. I don't know why by 2026, it's kind of random, 7 years from now, but by 2026, about 100 million, that's million with an M, parcels will be delivered in the U.S. every day, about double the current rate. And so, wow. Yeah. That's according to estimates from FedEx. But, and so everything will be, but here's the overall takeaway that I got out of this was that, even while everything expands and it's not like margins are going to be expanding for e-commerce, they're expected to basically, it might not drive profits,
Yeah, because you got to, okay, so now you don't have your retail store, which means you don't have to pay the electrical bill. You don't have to pay people to stand around and help customers and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But you got to move a bunch of trucks, which consume diesel or electricity, 7 years from now, who knows. You've got to have more distribution centers, more docks, more forklifts, more pallets, more everything else. So
yes,
it cancels out.
And, I guess it does cancel out, and it's harder and harder the more you have to do that. And I think that people are going to be curious about like, how do we, what's the best? There's like a kind of a triumvirate of like a business model that you do all these right things organizationally, and where the customer knows exactly what they've ordered and they know how long it's going to take and all of the. But apparently this triumvirate is much harder to execute than it's much harder to meets the eye. So. It's a growing thing, and you better like get on the last mile delivery train if you want to survive. But it seems like in the short term, it sounds like a wild ride. It sounds like a challenging one.
It's going to be a wild ride, but for customers, a lot of that's going to happen behind the scenes, obviously.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you think about, FedEx's old model. I guess it's still sort of their model, where we were talking about this earlier, actually. Every package would have to go through Memphis. If FedEx sent a package, even if it was from Chattanooga to Rossville, theoretically it would go to Memphis, multiple hours away, and then get on a truck and then go back to Rossville for sorting and everything. I think what we're already seeing, because this is not going to be a change where somebody flips a switch and all of a sudden we've doubled the number of packages that we're shipping. It's going to happen every year. It's going to be a little more. But what we're seeing is getting a more localized, regionalized distribution model, right? Because we're needing to stage things. We can't continue to keep everything, and there's not a warehouse big enough to where you can literally hold everything like we would in the old days and then ship it all over the place. I think we're going to see a lot more local and regional distribution, and we're already seeing that partially as a result of the demand for long haul trucking, right? Which used to be the old way. We'd move something from Savannah to California, and the price on that has gone up so much. A lot of people have started adapting their systems to do that hub and spoke type of system where drivers are home every night. And I think that could be a good thing for drivers ultimately if we get back to more of a regionalized model with a lot more distribution centers where things are staged closer to the customer.
Well, and speaking of trying to save and figure out new ways, apparently UPS is rolling out a major pricing revamp as it benefits from its network efficiency steps. What do you know about Mark Solomon's coverage of this? I know so that much. Yeah, I know that apparently that they are Rob Martinez, the CEO of Parcel Consultancy of Shipware, has said that there's been a boost in density and a reduction in the company's unit cost as more packages move through their fixed cost infrastructure, and the savings are likely to be passed on to shippers in the form of lower rates. Although some of the shippers may see rate increases if the company determines that it's not being properly compensated for its true cost to serve. but it's likely to open up a new front in the market share war between UPS and FedEx. So that duopoly, maybe UPS is going to achieve a little bit of maybe they're going to like get a leg up on that extremely competitive wall right there. But I think that overall, it would be UPS handles 20.7 million packages every day.
It's huge
across 220 countries. So it's great that it's looking for. It's continuing to stay light on its feet in certain ways, and I think it's necessary. It's a long article and in depth, and Mark Solomon covers it really well. Our markets managing editor. So check that one out.
There's really two quick pieces to that I should mention. Which one is, when UPS got started, it was primarily a business to business. So if you needed to move something overnight, to your legal firm or your accountant or your Shanghai branch of your company, UPS gets it there. And oftentimes it's a truck dropping off multiple packages at once, which is great for them, right? It's less driving around, less doing nothing. As we get into the consumer side, now you're getting sometimes one package with your 2-day Amazon Prime delivery, and
which is not very efficient,
not very dense, not very efficient. They're driving around a lot more to deliver the same number of packages. So what they've done, the second part is they've created these hubs, kind of like what we're talking about. They've created multiple hubs in Atlanta, Dallas, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, and Indianapolis to try to push that density out toward the customer who's ultimately going to get the package and hopefully revamp their system a little bit. UPS has always been a little bit slower to move, I think, than FedEx, just the way their labor structure is set up and some other issues. And I know this is a huge effort for them. So it's good to see that they're catching up.
I think in general, what we're seeing this week is we saw a couple of interesting headlines on freight and tech and investment, which we've talked about. And, there's certainly last mile and the e-commerce is really changing the landscape of logistics and how things are done. This week, there also just seemed to be a lot of it's that time of the year, I think.
Good time to pass a law. It's starting to warm up. People are going outside.
Well, there actually really is like a clock to how some of this works. Apparently, like if something doesn't get on the table by around now,
then you got to wait till next year.
You just about do, because the politics and everything by August. Everybody's running for president again.
Yeah, that kind of puts a stop to everything. That sounds like an empty Guinness
paint
there.
Can. Hook a brother up. Thank you, sir.
There you go.
Wow. I mean, I think I'm just drinking Coke here, actually. Hey, but overall, this is what I wanted to say, Ellis Smith here. A lot of these articles can be in-depth. And, let's just hit a few of these. Like one of the things about U.S. carriers now face a carbon surcharge in Canadian provinces.
I can give you that one fast. Canada, concerned about all the smog and everything, they want to put a carbon surcharge for any diesel fuel that's sold to trucks in Canada. Here's the problem. What if a truck comes from the United States, fills up in the U.S., drives through Canada, releasing its pollution, and then drives back into the United States without buying gas? They're not paying that carbon surcharge.
Problem solved.
Yeah. So, that's obviously what U.S. trucking companies would do. I would think they're very savvy.
I think it's
Canada has seen around the corner on this, and they're saying, well, you can do whatever you want, but if you're going to drive through Canada, you need to register, and then somehow, and this is where I get a little mystified, somehow track the amount of gas that they're expending or the amount of diesel they're expending in Canada, and then pay accordingly. So good luck to everyone on fulfilling that.
Well, I think too, just for brokers or carriers trying to get loads to go into Canada, it's already a little complicated, if not a lot complicated. And now you're just making it a little bit harder.
Yeah, I mean, how much paperwork am I going to have to do to get my maple syrup across the border? It's starting to and we talked this. I don't want to get too deep, but the supply chain as it stands between U.S. and Canada, it's always been very open. You got factories on both sides of the border, finished goods going back and forth and having, value added to them each time. you do run the risk as you overcomplicate this of really disrupting that supply chain, having people have to relocate their operations to get rid of the blockage.
Don't break the chain.
Don't break the chain. Never break the chain.
States are taking the lead in what they call policy disruption for AV and EV. And, this is, I think that this would be a good, John Gallagher is covering this, our regulatory Washington editorial reporter. And I've been wondering about this because we know that, Ellis, we know like infrastructure is a big problem. We know it remains a stalemate in how we are going to be improving infrastructure, and without going down that road, they can't figure out, whether, we're gonna toll, or we're gonna tax fuel, or we're going to privately enterprise it all somehow. We just don't know what we're going to do. And in the meantime, nothing is happening. But at least, and I was wondering, well, the tech for autonomous is coming. You know what I mean?
Coming.
And I don't know, like some people.
Daimler just rolled out level 2 already, and they're working on, I think they said level 5, level 7. I can't remember.
There is no level 7. You're just making things up.
Level 70, I think. Maybe that's what it was. But
they're not having level 5 anytime soon either.
That's where the robot also gets out and unloads the truck for you when you get there.
If only, right? But of course, a driver would always have to accompany them in every way, so no jobs would be displaced. No, but at least some states are getting together to try to figure out their regulatory environment so that when these when autonomous and electric vehicles are really hitting the road, like they have a plan in place. So it's just another, at least it's taking in with some forward-thinking states, and we're not going to name names yet, that they are anticipating this and taking off one regulatory headwind for the innovators trying to make the freight and the tech happen.
And the states have been a little stymied because if you think back to things like the internet or Airbnb or Uber, these things sort of emerged, and local cities and states, they started scratching their heads and saying, well, wait a second, we don't have any laws governing this. How can it be? And so there was this mad scramble to now you have all different rules. Every city you go to, sometimes the Uber can pick you up at the airport, sometimes it can't, depending on whatever local. And so they kind of get behind and they get panicked and they do a bunch of dumb stuff. So with autonomous vehicles, it's nice that they're looking ahead. The fact is, though, that autonomous vehicles are a heck of a lot safer so far, despite the well-publicized crashes and whatnot. The reason that's news is because they don't crash very often. It's like a plane crash. If planes were crashing every day, yes, it'd be terrible, but it wouldn't be news. Regular human drivers crash all the time. I think a person is almost certain to get in at least one, and usually more than one, crash in their lifetime in which they are the driver. It's just guaranteed. Autonomous vehicles don't do that. Their safety record is far better. So it's difficult for me to see what the states are going to do to help that. Just kind of stay out of the way.
At least they'll
don't do anything.
At least they can say, yes, you're permitted to be here.
Yeah, if they could just issue a permit. I know they have working groups and stuff, so we'll sort of find out what they come up with, and it'll be interesting, I'm sure, to everybody.
Well, we will be waiting and continuing to cover it.
Correct.
So also, speaking of which, states and dealing with infrastructure, how do they fund their improvements? Have you ever been on I-81?
Love it. Great road.
Are you?
No, it's not.
Okay. Because, it would be a great road because it's very scenic and it's beautiful. You're going through bucolic, Western Virginia. And it's lovely until you suddenly get backed up for the next 2.5 hours or however long. And so it's a very important lane for truckers. It is, and it is very overdue for it being increased in capacity. And, Virginia actually had a proposal on the table a few months ago to start tolling on the road. And that got a lot of backlash.
A lot of talk about that.
And that was denied. So everybody just continues to go along on the aging highway. And now there has been a plan that has been approved on I-81, And, and this is interesting. It's a little tricky because it's so complicated.
Oh, it's real tricky. I love it.
It involves a series of new taxes on diesel fuel and gasoline. So they're going to phase it in as late as 2021, while others kick in later this year. And also, and here's where I feel like it gets a little tricky, it involves higher registration fees. Yeah. So that's not like one of those it's like tolling taxes. No, this is higher registration.
And when you
fees.
say higher, let's be clear, it's 40% higher.
Wow.
On the heaviest Class 8 vehicles.
Oh, yeah. I saw that. Yeah. That's a lot higher.
What I love about this is I love things where it's like, look, and it's true. You can't build the road with no money. Now, they already have money for highways, so it's a little bit of a cop-out, but let's pretend like they're already spending all the money on other essential things, which may or may not be true. So you need money. You got to raise taxes, but don't worry. These taxes won't kick in until 2021. It's future you who's going to get taxed. It's not today.
0% financing for the next 7 years.
0% APR.
You're like, what am I investing in that I'll be paying off for 7 years?
They've learned a little bit from the retail industry. I love that. So I applaud them for that and for their craftiness.
No, you don't. No, I don't know what you do, but hey, don't we have to figure out? And this, I just talked to Dave Heller, the Vice President of Regulatory and Legislation at TCA, and I asked him. I said, is in the end, should truckload be willing to pay more, whether it's in taxes or tolling
to avoid detention?
Well, no. Just should they? In the end, they use the highways more. Should they be more? And I think that, I think he felt a little put on the spot because he said, well, doesn't that get to the kind of crux of the matter?
It does, because it's a trade-off. If you're sitting on the highway and you're not moving and your ELD meter is running, right, and you're running out of hours and you're not moving, which means you're not making any money, that costs you money. A truck that's not running costs you money. But so does a 40% increase on registration costs. So does an increase in the fuel surcharges. And so how do you? And I'm sure that our various people who are interested in legislation from the trucking and truckload industry have been active and participating in this. Yeah,
no one wants to be taxed more.
Nobody wants to be taxed, but nobody wants their trucks sitting there not going anywhere either. Detention has a real cost to it. So I don't know how that shakes out, but that was you asked him a good question. And
well, I think that there are two sides to this equation where on the one hand, you're like, I'm just doing my business and America needs me. This is an economic driver.
This isn't like a premium product. I'm not asking for an extra scoop of ice cream here. I just want to deliver the stuff that people need.
We're delivering the goods.
And you're telling me that costs extra. That's kind of what I was getting into with. It's not like Virginia has a $0 budget for spending money on roads, and now suddenly they've discovered that this road needs to be repaired. They have a road budget. There's a federal road budget. They get money for roads. Yeah. So they're just spending it on other roads and not this one, evidently. Or they're saying the cost is high.
Who assumes responsibility ultimately? Who does?
And it's the Eisenhower federal highway system, but I believe the states take care of it. It's sort of a delegated responsibility. So it's hard to say.
Another coverage of John Gallagher's for our regulatory coverage this week. Closing the drug test loopholes could hit driver availability. Well, yeah, right.
Hopefully not.
It's just a fact that here's the thing. I also actually talked to Dave Heller about this, but there's just no doubt about it. We cannot tolerate. You cannot have drivers who are under the influence driving on our highways. No, and if you have better ways of testing, then and yes, if that contributes to a shortage, so be it. It's.
Do we want to get into whether or not there's really a driver shortage? I mean,
sure. No,
there's the driver shortage. There is no driver shortage. Just as there's no anything shortage. There's a shortage of the current going rate, right? So
yes.
If you want more drivers, just pay drivers more. It's real easy, actually.
I've talked about this so many times
yes.
in the past.
So, but that's the short version. But so yeah, if you're worried, you're saying, oh well, man, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel, and we're having to get these drug-addled guys to drive the trucks, and this is really gonna hurt us. Well, then pay more. Be like Walmart. They're paying what, $90,000 a year, and of course
wow. Actually, you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Ellis Smith just solved the driver shortage. All it took was a couple of Guinnesses. Pay them more. Actually, seriously, man, total compensation is by far the number one factor in drivers saying why they're leaving or staying. So, man, I'm with you. I know. And we know that the goods are still being delivered. It's just at what
they're
rate?
saying is, and it's nothing that revolutionary. They're just saying in 2020, next year, they're going to have to query the clearinghouse on all prospective applicants. So anybody seeking a job or changing jobs is just going to have to register, whether or not they're clean for drugs or not. And so that's just going to be, so just don't do drugs.
Okay. Well, simple enough, right? Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Well, finally, we're getting down to the bottom of the barrel here on our regulatory coverage. Trucking and rail industries to advise regulators on national security. Why would they do such a thing?
Oh man, this is one of my favorite things because on the one hand, you have people who see this as like, it's a conspiracy theory, like it's they're out there, writing the laws and stuff. And on the other hand, you have people who say, oh no, it's just industry groups are advising and saying, hey, you can make a law, but here's what the effects of the law are going to be. It's going to shut down commerce or cause the price of whatever to go higher. And so it's good for there to be a dialogue there. And I think that, and this happens in almost every industry, whatever industry you pick it, whether it's payday lending or trucking or, video games, basket weaving, there's a lobbying group that interacts with, on behalf.
There's a lobbying group for basket weaving.
Maybe not basket weaving, but
that would be interesting.
Maybe bird watching. I don't know if that's one or not. But there's a group that goes and they say, look, here's what we think about the current law. Here's what we'd like to see. And sometimes Congress will say, okay, well, give us a draft of what you'd write, and then they'll modify it. And that's very common. So this is sort of not that amazing that this is happening. What's amazing is that it's just now happening for me. Just sort of knowing the lobbying efforts that do take place.
It's just now happening.
And it's good to have that dialogue because you get rules. We've seen online a lot of backlash against hours of service rules and things like that come out. And others have said, well, that's cool that you're mad about it, but where were you when we were coming up with the rules and asking for input and your name wasn't on there in terms of giving feedback? So I think it's good to have the dialogue. It's good to let people know, hey, what you're about to do could be harmful or it could be helpful. And I think that's finally been recognized by the Transportation Security Administration.
Well, another complex regulatory article was the port report from our port correspondent, Michael Angel, who talks about how Trump signed an executive order seeking to boost U.S. energy development. But he points out that, the order, it aims to, give a boost to oil and gas permitting. But Trump's own trade policies also are kind of working against the rapidly growing export markets. So he's giving a boost to some of the very things that he's put the brakes on. So some things are working, some things he's trying to stimulate. It's interesting.
Trump is probably one of the most interesting presidents we've had in a while from a trade standpoint. On the one hand, yes, he's trying to speed up approval, which has often been extremely slow, whether it's a pipeline to move the stuff so we don't have to do it all by truck or, just individual wells. Yeah, that's going to speed it up. That's going to help us export more and import less, which will make us a slightly wealthier country. On the other hand, he's starting trade wars everywhere, and that
now apparently it's with Europe.
Yeah, with Europe, Canada, China, whoever the enemy of the week, right? And that tariffs basically reverse what you're doing on the making things easier side, easier and cheaper. Tariffs make things harder and more expensive. So I don't know how this is going to net out at the end of the day, but I'm sure that historians will have a field day trying to sort of unravel, what the net effect is of all these things. But generally, the more you try to monkey with the knobs and levers and, I'm going to move this over here and that over there, the trucking industry alone is a $726 billion industry. It doesn't
in the U.S.
You can't. It's not. It's not like steering one truck where you can move the steering wheel to the left and change lanes. You're talking about a huge industry with established infrastructure and tons of drivers. So when you start messing with this stuff, there's a big impact to that. And I think we're just now starting to see some of the effects of that.
Yeah. What happens downstream?
Downstream,
for all of
as they
consumers.
say in the oil industry.
Yeah. Hey, man, way to go. Good job. We're not going to do a big deal, little deal, because we just hit you with...
It's all a big deal.
Right? We just hit you with 10 headlines in 40 minutes. I think that's pretty impressive. Way to fill in for the illustrious John Paul Hampstead.
Big shoes, JP.
And we wanted to say thanks to TriumphPay, our sponsor, again. So shout out to them and, to everyone trying to make our industry just a little bit better each and every day.
One step at a time.
All right. So, hey, great to have you on the train. And how many more of these?
It depends on when I run out of beer.
Examples can we?
Then that'll be the last one. We should thank Jonathan Smith, no relation, our engineer who's helping us out with this. And making us sound good, who soon will be making us look good as we make the transition to the wide, exciting world of video. So stay tuned for that.
Silent Jonathan,
That's right.
doing it here.
Silent
he
but
says
deadly.
He's a glorified babysitter, but I give him a lot more credit than that on this podcast. He is making us sound good and, yes, soon to look good. Also, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you're still with us right now, don't forget to check out our website. If you haven't heard of the Transparency 19.
Ooh, good show, yeah.
It is speaking of freight and tech and innovation, I dare you to find a more interesting conference in all of logistics. It's hot. It's fun. How do I know? Because we had one last year, and this one's even going to be bigger and better. We've got 6 or 7 keynotes.
It's going to be unbelievable. Brad Jacobs is going to be there. Shelley Simpson from JB Hunt. Brad Jacobs, of course, from XPO.
Gary Vaynerchuk.
Gary, that's right. And
is he going to launch us with some F-bombs?
What's the over?
Inquiring
on,
minds want to know.
On the number of profanities. That's going to be a fireside chat, very focused, very directed. It's going to be a lot of fun. He's going to talk about our industry and how we're positioning ourselves. Transparency is just a cool thing. It's about the tech. It's about the next thing. And I know that the disruption that we've been seeing in transportation here and in freight recently, a lot of people are curious about what's next. Come on down and find out.
Can't wait to see you there at the Georgia Convention Center May 6th through 8th. And with that, we're out. As always, we go into more detail about each of the topics we've talked about today on our website, FreightWaves.com. We will continue to publish this podcast weekly, so be sure to subscribe to What the Truck on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, make sure to leave us a review to let us know what you think of our new podcast. That'll do it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week on What the Truck.